สวัสดีค่ะ So first of all, let's take some time to reflect on 2025. We have seen a lot of ups and downs in the Thai economy. So from your perspective, how would you like to describe the whole economic situation in Thailand during the past year?
That's a good and broad question. And I think the way that I would approach it, I might call it the good, the bad, and the ugly. So if we look at the Thai economy, let's start with the good. I think that we have seen the Thai economy maintaining relatively well performance, although not as spectacular as we would want to wish for. And if we look at export, I think that this year we have done quite well in terms of export resilience in the first half of the year. But maybe the second half and next year might not be as good. And that's a result of perhaps the rest of the world front-loading their import before Trump's tariff kicks in. So that's one good area to at least be happy that it has not tanked all over, but it maintains some kind of growth potential. And I think tourism has done also quite relatively well, although not at the level where we were before COVID. So perhaps if we want to take a positive view, the Thai economy has somewhat maintained its resilience. But then the bad, we have seen that if we compare it to regional peers, Thailand has not done well this year and the past few years. Also going forward, we will not do too well compared to our regional competitors. This year overall, the GDP growth would be approximately 2%, and next year the IMF is expecting less. So if you compare that with ASEAN peers or Vietnam is expected to grow 6%, and ASEAN average would be no less than 4%. So that is something to be concerned that when other people look at the Southeast Asia region, Thailand may not be the most interesting country in this part of the world. So I think that that's one thing that we have to be concerned when we are trying to also keep on attracting foreign direct investment. And if we move on to the ugly, I think that we have had 3 events that confirm that we do definitely need a better preparation, reform, and better management of the economy. And I think these 3 issues are first the earthquake, which result in one building that completely collapsed, and that happened to be a government building, Auditor General to be exact. Yeah. So for that, it also led to questions on transparency and government procurement and all that. And it points out to issues that cannot be shy away from the issue of corruption. And so that's one issue. And we also see that the flood, which result from lack of preparation and everything. And people might say that this comes from the government, the new government being new and not being in a good way to prepare. But it lacks the kind of the holistic management that we want to see from a government that is leading the country forward. And I think that the next thing that perhaps come on my list of ugly is also the scam center, that we are hearing the issues of scam center and how it deals with companies and related parties that shows somewhat the lack of transparency that we expect to see in an economy that is growing and try to go forward into the next year. So to answer your question, I kind of look at it as the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that means that Thailand has a lot of momentum going forward. We are still a country that is most visited in the world. But at the same time, we have a lot of indications that pointed out to the lack of reform, the lack of holistic management that could hamper the way Thailand goes forward in the next year.
And you mentioned the 3 ugly sides of Thailand that has affected Thailand's economy overall. So how did these events actually affect the reputation of Thailand, especially economically?
I think, if we add in the other aspect that we haven't mentioned, which is political instability in Thailand, we have changed 3 prime ministers in 3 years. So that, with that kind of not so good news, the earthquake, and the only building that collapsed was the government building, the loss of life in the earthquake, in the flood, and also the kind of the issue that Thailand has been in the news. I think it undermined Thailand's reputation. So the political instability added to that aspect. And it would make Thailand look as if we are very volatile in terms of government stability, in terms of taking action on the kind of the issue that affect the whole country. So I think it undermines our credibility and the view of stability that Thailand should have in this period of time when other people are also having more or less stability. Not to mention, in the last few months, the war with Thailand and Cambodia. So all this has become in the news more than other news that we would like Thailand to be.
So this is very concerning for Thailand, especially on its reputation on the international stage, whether it's economically or even in politics as well. So from your perspective, how difficult is it for the new government to fix all of this in order to increase the economic reputation among other ASEAN countries?
I think, as we get into the election mode, most parties would have to be concerned about the kind of the short-term selling point that they want to do. So I'm afraid that we would be looking at many political parties addressing the issues that could be kind of short-term stimulus, quick win, as the Anutin cabinet call it. But Thailand's problem is very structural. And I think that with that, it might take away the attention that we need to focus more on the more difficult issues of structural reform. And addressing structural reform would mean we would need to address the government transparency, government capability, level playing field in the business sphere. So all these issues are very difficult and very structural. And in the kind of election mode and in this kind of very short-term oriented, I'm afraid that we might shy away from really addressing what could be the longer-term measures that Thailand needs to consider.
But when it comes to longer term measures, it has been so difficult for various governments to address this one. So from your observation, why do you think it has been so difficult to address these issues?
I think 2 issues. One is internal and the other is external. The internal issue is that Thailand has long been following the kind of the export-driven growth model. So our economic model or industrial policy has focused mainly on facilitating companies to come here, invest in Thailand. So we give a lot of tax holiday through the Board of Investment and all that. But now, I think the economic model that Thailand is facing calls for a more detailed and more difficult issues of how do we really address the lack of productivity in many areas. How do we make sure that in the age of supply chain resilience and supply chain relocation, how does Thailand remain competitive and remain indispensable in the part of the value chains that we have been part of? And this calls for a different kind of policy measures that we need to discuss more. It's not the same kind of incentive, financial incentive as usual, but it requires more in-depth analysis of where Thailand stands in different industries. How do we make sure that our suppliers also survive in the kind of the very volatile geo-economic environment? And that brings me to the external issues that it has been more difficult because we are now facing the world where the global integration as we know it, or the globalization as we know it, is now changing into a very fragmented world because of the tariff and because of more national economic concern of different countries. So this kind of external environment is not very favorable for countries that are export dependent. So we also need to discuss how we can look into the new kind of economic model that we can survive in the world where it's becoming more hostile to free trade and free globalization as we know it before.
And the US trade tariffs has been a turning point for Thailand and many countries around the world. And there are also geopolitical rivals as well. And from your perspective, how vulnerable is the Thai economy to these global uncertainties?
I think Thailand is in a very vulnerable position because we are an export dependent country. The export to our GDP is about 60%. And the US alone is almost 20% of our export destination. So Thailand is in a kind of a dual dependency situation, which makes things very difficult. Because on the other side, on the import side, Thailand also depends a lot on China as our major source of import, and now also as source of investment. So in a world where these two hegemonic power, economic power, are in a period where they don't like each other. So it makes it very difficult for countries in the middle, like Thailand as well as other Southeast Asian countries. So the issue that the US will look at, right now the trade negotiation has been suspended since November because of the war with Cambodia. So next year going forward, we are hopeful that we would be able to conclude the trade agreement with the US, which we don't know yet what would happen because the ongoing issue between Thailand and Cambodia. So that's one main issue. Not to mention that the US has also mentioned that the transshipment or having the product of China in the kind of supply chain would be something that they look at. So, Thailand being very dependent on the inputs from China would also make it vulnerable for Thailand to make sure that we have to make sure our supply chain rules of origin, regulations are clear, that we can demonstrate that these are not transshipment and these are our rules of origin are trustworthy enough. So there are a lot of issues that we would have to look at going forward, just in respect to what the US is looking for in their trade negotiation.
So how do you expect the tariff negotiations to unfold, especially now that Thailand is still experiencing the border tensions with Cambodia, and President Trump has made himself clear that if you don't do anything with the border tensions, then the tariff negotiations will not proceed even further?
I think the worst case scenario is whether the tariff would be increased, because right now we can kind of make sure that we stay at similar level compared to our Southeast Asian peers. But if Thailand's tariff should be higher because President Trump might feel that, one day, Thailand is not doing something that we promised we would do. And if that should increase, it would be a kind of a disadvantage for Thailand. And I think more than that, it would increase the instability and the vulnerability for Thailand. When outside investors and foreign investors look at Thailand, they might think that, political instability is there. The election is not sure if the election result would be respected, would be going through. It's not even sure, because we have had past experience confirming that the election result might not always be what the result of the government formation. So that could increase more the kind of the reputation of Thailand as a country with unstable political environment. And I think that if that should be the case, I'm afraid many foreign investors might just say, see you when you're ready, Thailand. because we have so many issues that we need to address.
And they might turn to other neighboring countries which seem to be more competitive, like Vietnam, because right now Vietnam has like very high GDP compared to other ASEAN neighbors. And looking back at Thailand, looking into 2026, many financial institutions have forecasted that Thailand's GDP would go even lower than 2%. So is your personal prediction similar to these financial institutions?
Well, you know, the IMF, the World Bank, the ADB, and even the NESDC has already come out to say that, you know, they're expecting no more than 2% GDP growth when Vietnam is expected to grow about 6%. So I think that, you know, it's kind of true that Thailand is now the fourth, even or the fifth ranked economy in the region in terms of economic growth potential for 2026. So that is a worrying sign. And it's not just the GDP growth potential. If you have seen what Vietnam has been doing in the past few years, they have also committed to a lot of structural reform, government downsizing, and making sure that their bureaucracy is more lean, more mean, and stronger. So that is something that I think, you know, it's kind of sad when now people look at Southeast Asia, and Thailand is not the first country that they would mention, but it would be countries like Vietnam or Indonesia or even Philippines. So I think that we have a lot of agenda and a lot of homework that we need to look at, what we need to do to kind of build up our resilience, competitiveness, as well as the regional attractiveness.
Yes, and right now Thailand is heading towards the general elections in February 2026. So if the new government comes in, what would be the most urgent issue that the new administration needs to address first?
I think if I look at it from my perspective, looking at the kind of international strategy, I think that the industrial policy of how Thailand should go forward in terms of to increase our competitiveness, that would be quite a big agenda. Because as I said earlier, that we have long followed the same similar strategy of inviting foreign investment to come in, set up their shops, set up their factory in Thailand, and then depend on their activities to kind of lift Thailand up economically in terms of technology transfer and all that. But I think perhaps that has already come to its somewhat ending. And now to move Thailand forward, I think we need to look at the industrial policy that look at the activities that Thai suppliers are doing. How do we make sure that the resilience for supplier is strong for Thailand? How can Thailand remain an attractive and a competitive partner for multinational companies to make sure that their investment in Thailand is also help them resilient in their overall economic and supply chain, global value chain. So I think we need to look at a more in-depth and look more into the global value chain of activities, what we are doing, how we can make sure that we are not just going after the kind of the new and attractive industries, but to make sure that Thai suppliers and Thai players are also have opportunities to survive in those industries. And I think that it is also important to make sure that the level playing field in the private sector is more an issue of concern for the government. Because right now, if you look at all the industries, we can see that only the kind of the major players, the big conglomerates are controlling in many areas. And I think that to make sure that SMEs and other players have a room to play in this, we need to have more policies that concern on competition policy, intellectual property, more liberalization in many sectors, including services. So I think it is time for the next government and for Thai people to seriously think that, you know, we actually need a real wake-up call now to be discussing about how do we go about in the next phase of Thailand economic policy. And I think perhaps it would be a horse year, but I don't think that Thailand would be galloping very fast into the year of the horse in 2026.
And that's a very powerful message right there. All right, thank you so much for today. ขอบคุณนะคะ
ขอบคุณค่ะ Thank you very much ค่ะ